The second week of OTAs is upon us. Good afternoon, everybody. A good Tuesday afternoon to you all. May 28th, 2024. This is the Southside Beat, as we are Monday through Friday, 3 Eastern, typically, but always on DK Pittsburgh Sports on YouTube, later in podcast form. Today, of course, pushed back an hour just because of the fact, number one, OTA practice ended just around 2 Eastern, got out of the locker room around 2:30, so gives a little more time to get home and get adjusted and everything, get everything organized, even though today's out like everybody getting back from the holiday, I think. Today's, I think, the day where everybody's starting to feel the effects of that 3-day weekend. That is the unofficial start of summer, known as Memorial Day weekend, and we hope you all were able to have a great and safe holiday. No Chris Halleck today. There was a pretty big storm, I guess, in the Dallas area, and Chris's house is without power as of right now. So no power means no internet, means no live stream. So that's on Chris's end. On my end, I'm here, of course, as per usual in my usual spots. And I just got home, like I said, about an hour ago from the start of week 2 of Steelers OTAs. It was practice number 4 out of 10 that the Steelers are allotted in the voluntary capacity between last week, this week, and next week over at the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex. And if you go to dkpittsburghsports.com or even on this YouTube channel, don't do it now because we're obviously live. I got a really cool video of Najee Harris going against one Ryan Shazier. That's right, Ryan Shazier in drills. Now, Shazier has been on the South Side helping out kind of as an assistant coach, but funny enough, he's been helping out the running backs room more than his typical position of linebacker. And, you know, Shazier had one of those, I call them plungers, but like tackling dummies on a stick, basically. And he popped Najee's helmet right off of his head. And it was pretty cool. So that video's up right now here on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Steelers YouTube channel. And of course, on dkpittsburghsports.com. Mike, hope your weekend was good too. As far as I heard from Chris, everybody's okay. Thankfully, everybody stayed safe. But I guess there were some pretty bad storms that rolled in over late last night and early this morning. I had a great weekend since you asked. You know, got to barbecue, got to have a couple hot dogs, some pasta salad, some of the usual Memorial Day weekend fare. Of course, a couple of daddy sodas mixed in there as well. Did the Pirates game Saturday, so that was a lot of fun. Really good crowd over at PNC Park. Of course, Pirates, did they beat the Braves that day? Yes, they did. If I'm scratching to remember things from 2 days ago, what am I doing? 3 days ago, I guess. What am I doing? Darth Sniper says in our YouTube comments, of course, as we are live on that platform, can we hear more frequent updates on the cornerbacks and wide receivers? We can, and to be honest, one of my focal points going into today was watching Van Jefferson practice. And of course, I wanted to speak with him in the open locker room that took place after practice, but no Van Jefferson available today. Now, they had team photos going on today, so some players were cycling in and out. You know, they had their full, it's like they do the headshots, they do the like stuff in front of the plain background, and then they do like you see on at the Acrisure Stadium, like on the video board, you know, like the let's go, like the hype videos that the players all pop on the screen on, you know, and saying like, this is Pittsburgh, we are steel, whatever, that kind of thing. They shoot that kind of stuff preseason. And certainly today was the day to do it. They had the backdrops set up, team photographers were taking headshots and whatnot, and players were in pads doing that. So coming in and out of the locker room in the post practice, the reason why I'll sit here and say it was a quieter locker room is because more players were cycling in and out than usual in a pretty quick fashion. And also, you know, some are still working their way back from Memorial Day as well. So over on the south side, of course, they held practice today. They held OTA number 4. And again, as it was asked by Darth Sniper, talking about cornerbacks and wide receivers. I wanted to speak to Van Jefferson after practice, but I didn't get a chance to. He just wasn't available. He was doing other things, and that's okay, and that happens. So we'll catch up with Van Jefferson pretty soon. But coming up to dkpittsburghsports.com later on this evening, I spoke to Isaac Seumalo, and I spoke to the 3 rookie offensive linemen. Of course, Frazier, McCormick, and Fautanu about learning from a guy like and Isaac Seumalo, and you'll want to hear that. You'll want to read that. Mike says, "Hope Russ wasn't saying Steelers Nation, let's ride." When I left the building, Jalen Warren and Nick Herbig were getting their photos taken. So Warren was like in front of the one backdrop, and he was like flexing, and he had the jersey on, and he was doing all that, and then Nick Herbig was getting ready to step in. So that's who I saw going in when I left, and I think Patrick Queen just got out, so he was taking photos. But no, I was making the joke actually that today was the day that Russ was going to drop Steeler Nation, let's ride, Steelers country, let's ride. So if they do that, it'd be really funny, but I don't think that's going to happen today. As we all know, it is the end of May. It is football in shorts. We can only glean so much from these practices, and of course, anything that happens in practice has to be confirmed by players anyway. Nothing really to write home about today. I will say this, since cornerbacks and wide receivers were asked about, I still think they need to add another wide receiver in that post-June 1st cut deadline, where teams can obviously parse out the cap between next year and this year, rather than absorbing the entire cap hit for this year, as opposed to if they were to trade them before June 1st. I think the Steelers are a really prime candidate, and Chris and I have talked about that on this show, for going out and getting one of those wide receivers that might be available. And that's not to say that Van can't be a 2. He's just 2 years removed from having an even decent season. And even then, in 2021, he was the number 3 on that Super Bowl champion Rams team behind Odell Beckham and Cooper Kupp. So, Van's never been in a position like he's been in now. Can he be serviceable opposite George Pickens? Can he be good opposite George Pickens? I think he can be okay, but I don't think he could be a true wide receiver 2, kind of like we're used to seeing in the past with this franchise, what we're used to seeing with this organization. Even looking at last year, when you had Deontay Johnson and George Pickens flanked outside, you felt comfortable at minimum in a lot of ways about that wide receiver tandem, and certainly more comfortable about those two than you do about the current tandem of George Pickens and Van Jefferson, to go along with Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin, other guys that can contend in the slot. So I think that adding a wide receiver 2 is still in the cards, and we're coming up to that that June 1st rather, cut deadline for teams. So they're a team to watch. The Steelers are, with respect to that. The cornerbacks room, to me, I think it's going to be Joey Porter Jr., Dante Jackson, and then they're going to figure out the slot. I think the slot is wide open as of right now as to who plays that. I'm curious to see where they put Ryan Watts, and I'm not saying he's going to start day one or anything like that, but I'm curious to see where they put Ryan Watts from the standpoint of, do they put him more in the box? Do they put him more at safety, in the slot, outside at corner? I'm curious to know what they do with him, because that's a third cornerback that they drafted over the last 2 years that's built exactly the same way, and I wrote about him a couple of weeks ago. Mark says, Omar's still working on bringing in another wide receiver, no doubt in my mind. I think you're right. I feel like you're right. I feel like that's the most logical step for this organization to go, at least now, with the wide receiver. Of course, they draft Roman Wilson, but he played, 2/3 of his snaps in college in the slot. I think it was 202 out of 300 even. So, you drafted a guy that's pretty specialized in one area, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not sitting here writing home about Roman Wilson and how it's any kind of a bad pick, 'cause I think it was a great pick. And I know Mike Tomlin loved Roman Wilson in the process and still loves Roman Wilson. And he's going to get the ball a lot this year. But it opens the concern of, is Van Jefferson right now the serviceable wide receiver 2 that the Steelers need? Now, Chris and I mentioned it late last week. There's an argument that Pat Freiermuth and his usage and how much he could run could be a candidate to take on the wide receiver 2 role, so to speak. Then, of course, that opens up more opportunities for guys like Darnell Washington, Michael Pruitt, of course, Connor Hayward as that tight end H-back kind of role. I think this could be a potentially big year for Pat Freiermuth in that way. So in that search for wide receiver 2, I think it's fair to include Freiermuth to an extent, but at the same time, he's still going to be a tight end in that position sense. Mike Tomlin loves positionless football, as he says, but some guys are really just good at what they do, and Pat Freiermuth certainly fits the bill on that and should stick right at tight end. That's not to say he can't go outside and run some routes. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I think we know what Pat Freiermuth pretty much is going to be. Matthew says, how about Beanie Bishop? Bishop, to me, is one of those guys that they take a flyer on. And to me, if you look at this crop of undrafted free agents, like, he's the most likely to make the team. Like, I'm not going to put it out there to say he's the next Jaylen Warren or anything in terms of he's an undrafted free agent, unheralded. No one really looked at him. And then he comes in and takes everything by storm. I can't sit here and say that. And really, that's hard to predict. And it's a very low percentage chance that that kind of thing happens anyway. You know, this isn't baseball where, you know, guys get drafted in the 40th round and then develop and then they're good relievers or they're good whatever. You know, Beanie Bishop, to me, he falls out of the draft for a reason, as we talked about before. Guys that go undrafted or that go in the 6th or 7th rounds, they're project players. Beanie Bishop is a project player. Now, I think he fits what the Steelers need as far as that slot corner nickel position. I think he's a good fit for that. But at the same time, I think they're looking for an accelerated development with him between now, of course, certainly rookie minicamp, but now and the start of training camp and through training camp. Like, I think they want to see a lot out of Beanie Bishop between now and then. And that's not to say he can't live up to it, because he certainly can. But at the same time, I think they're going to be asking a lot out of Beanie if they want him to fulfill that role. If he can develop and he can fulfill that role right away, then that's a guy you have on the cheap that can produce, that is a fit for the system. So we'll see exactly how Beanie Bishop's able to come along. Stephen A. says, I think Pat Freiermuth would be a good number 2 receiver if need be, but just think how much better Pat will be if the Steelers get another outside wide receiver. I completely agree with that. You know, when I look at the way Arthur Smith used tight ends last year and in the year before in Atlanta with Kyle Pitts, like, I wasn't thrilled about Kyle Pitts' usage. I wasn't thrilled about the results that I got out of Kyle Pitts, or that he got out of Kyle Pitts, or that I saw out of Kyle Pitts. But I think there's something there, at least with the way the offense operates, that allows Pat Freiermuth to succeed. Remember last year with Matt Canada, we sat here clamoring, like, Pat Freiermuth's getting open in the middle of the field. He's finding the seam. He's finding the soft spots in the defense. Get him the damn football. And Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, Mitch Trubisky, number one, couldn't really get him the football. But also, the offense didn't really benefit for things inside of the numbers or inside of the hashes, if you want to get even more central, I guess, pun intended. But now in this Arthur Smith offense, I think you're going to see a lot more chances in the middle of the field, and that's going to open up play for Freiermuth. I also think that's going to open up play and why it makes it so important that they went and got Roman Wilson in the draft, because of his vertical ability, because of his ability to separate in the center of the field. Like, that's going to help open up things underneath for Pat Freiermuth as well. So I think what the Steelers did this offseason helps Pat Freiermuth already, but as Stephen A. says, if they're able to get a true number 2, now I'm not saying shoot for the moon like a Brandon Ayuk or a DK Metcalf. That's possible. I would sit here and say that's possible at the least. I'm like adjusting my seat. But at the same time, is it what they need right now? Do they need to go pay all that cap? It doesn't hurt, does it? It doesn't hurt. And I said it before. If they go into training camp with Van Jefferson as their number 2, then they failed at addressing the number 2. That's not addressing the number 2. That's getting a good wide receiver 3, getting a good guy that could supplement what Pickens and player Y are going to be at the wide receiver position, because you have the slot lockdown with Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin. You know, Scotty Miller's not the answer. Denzel Mims is not the answer. It's like Hakeem Butler from last year. Remember Hakeem Butler, who was really just like athletically imposing, and you saw him at training camp. You see the big 21, and it's like, who's that guy? That's impressive. That looks like that could be a guy. And then he had stone hands. He couldn't catch the ball in training camp, and he was cut right away. Like, I'm not going to sit here and get too over the moon excited about Scotty Miller and Denzel Mims and Marquez Callaway. And even to an extent with Van Jefferson. Like, I think, again, Jefferson was more productive when you look at the splits from, it was 5 games with the Rams and 12 games with the Falcons. He had more yards with the Rams than he did with the Falcons, or at least it was a very similar number. It was a very close number, at least. But he wasn't as productive with Atlanta like he was in LA. Now, obviously, part of that is, let's just call it as it is. Sean McVay offense versus Arthur Smith offense. The Arthur Smith offense is not going to be as productive as the Sean McVay offense out in LA. That Sean McVay offense won a Super Bowl. But if Van Jefferson wasn't as productive with Arthur Smith, even in a wide receiver 3 role behind Drake London, what's he going to be in Pittsburgh? What's his ceiling? Stephen A. points out about Matt Williamson saying, if Pickens misses a series, a game, multiple games, the Steelers are in big trouble. Chris has been saying that too all along here. And I agree with it. If in this current state of this wide receivers room, if George Pickens sustains an injury, and let's say, knock on wood he's not, he misses a month of action. He misses a month of game action. What are the Steelers going to do? How are they going to adjust the offense? Is Roman Wilson going to move outside? Is it going to be Van Jefferson and Quez Watkins? Van Jefferson and Scotty Miller? Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin? You can't be comfortable with that at all. You can't be comfortable with the way it is right now. Mike Tomlin doesn't seek comfort, but you know what I mean. You can't be comfortable with what the Steelers have right now at wide receiver. You just can't. There's no way around it. Even with George Pickens in the room. And listen, I think George is a good player. I don't know if he's wide receiver 1 ready right now. Right now, as we sit here at the end of May, the Tuesday after Memorial Day, can I sit here and say George Pickens is ready to step up to be the number 1 wide receiver when the Steelers just changed out their offensive coordinator and their entire quarterbacks room? Am I ready to sit here and say that? I don't know. Because I think there's uncertainty with the quarterbacks room. I think there's uncertainty with Arthur Smith. What's it going to look like here? That's always going to be the quotient until we actually see what it looks like. But I can't sit here and say I feel totally confident in that wide receivers room right now, even with George Pickens in it. When I think about the cornerbacks room, obviously getting Dante Jackson is a massive help to Joey Porter Jr.'s case. Hold on. Marcus says, you forgot Mims, Galloway, Quez Watkins. I'm sorry, those aren't... I can't get excited about any of those guys. Mims, Callaway, Watkins, I can't get excited about them. Yeah, they're guys, they're players. They're better than, the tail end of the depth on last year's team. They're better than the Dez Fitzpatricks and the Hakeem Butlers of the world and the Jordan Birds of the world. Yeah, they're better than those guys. They don't have a solid wide receiver 2. If you consider George Pickens a 1. They don't have a solid wide receiver 2. And I really don't see the counter argument to it. I think Van's good, but he's not a wide receiver 2. I think Scotty Miller is good with special teams. I think he's serviceable in some ways. I think Mims and Galloway are good end of depth pieces. I think Watkins is a good depth piece. I don't see any of those guys being capable to take on the wide receiver 2 role. It's not there. They've never done it really in their careers either. Mark says they're not needle movers. No, they're not. You can't bother me with it. You just can't. I'm intrigued by Van because I think there's some post-hype sleeper stuff there. And when I say that, I mean, I think that the hype around him died down in 2022 when he just didn't produce. His best season was 2021. He's 2 years removed from it. He had career highs in catches, yards, yards per catch, touchdowns, every receiver metric. Van Jefferson had a career high in 2021. 2022, not a great year. Last year, he was worse in 12 games with the Falcons than he was in 5 games with the Rams. I just don't see... I don't see wide receiver 2 when I see Van Jefferson. I just don't see it. Now, again, James says there's no way they're done with the receivers room. I agree. And they have money to spend. Yes, they do. We got to see what they do with that post-June 1st cut line. Bayad says, if you could take the quarterback room through 14 games last year and turn that into a wide receivers room, it would be worse than this wide receivers room with George Pickens down for a month. Okay. That's fair. I don't know about that, but I get what you're getting at. Anyway, the cornerbacks room, right? We know Joey Porter Jr., Dante Jackson, right? But that slot position's so intriguing, and what they could potentially do with it. I can't talk. I can't speak. Corey Trice, of course, getting back onto the field is huge. Drafting Ryan Watson, kind of moving him around to a bunch of different places, which is a very possible thing, is huge. I think maybe the cornerback depth is more comfortable than it is the wide receiver depth. I think you have two capable. Certainly Joey is, but I think Dante Jackson's a very capable cornerback. And I think he's a good wide receiver, good cornerback too. We're talking so much about wide receivers. I think he's a good CB2 opposite Porter. And I think he kind of had a raw deal out in Carolina. He had a little injury history. And then they drafted J.C. Horn in the first round in, 2021? And he really didn't recover from that. Now, he had a pretty decent year last year comparatively to 21 and 22. So he's, if you want to put it this way, on the rise. But it's also, I think, an upgrade over Levi Wallace. But I'm not sure if the cornerbacks room is like all the way there yet. I think they need to see what they have from Corey Trice. They need to see what they have from Ryan Watts. They need to see what some of the depth options hold. They need to see what exactly they're going to be able to do when Porter has to come off the field and when Jackson has to come off the field. Could you argue they should have added a corner earlier in the draft? Yes. Could they go get one in that post-June 1 cut? Absolutely. They're not going to spend top dollar on it. That would be quite frankly unwise, and they're just not going to do that. They would be better served off doing that for the wide receivers and going to pay top dollar for a wide receiver too. But could they add depth in the cornerbacks room in that post-June 1 cut? Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, Joseph says it. Van Jefferson had Matthew Stafford compared to Desmond Ridder. I understand that. But also, like, not to bring this argument up, how many times in this podcast, in this show, have we had the Deontay Johnson argument where some chatters, I'll call you all out when I need to, some chatters will say, well, he only had one touchdown and he runs backwards. Like, okay, but the quarterbacks weren't that good either. It's the same concept. It's the same concept. Just buyer beware on that stuff. Buyer beware. I think Van's good. I think he's a good player. I just don't see wide receiver 2 in him. I don't see it. Even when he was in LA. Didn't see wide receiver 2 in him. And yeah, he was in a better offense with a better quarterback. That certainly helps. Now, Russell Wilson comparatively is better than Desmond Ridder. I'll give you that. But it's the same offense, isn't it? We'll see. We'll see. But again, I still think they're going to add. Marcus says Van is a 1,000-yard receiver under the right system. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, his career high is what, 800? And that was as a wide receiver 3 in LA, or 600, whatever it is. Like, I'm really trying to buy into all this. I really am. I'm trying to buy into Van Jefferson as best as I can, and I just can't do it. So, if he proves me wrong, great. You guys can be the first to come in here and tell me you told me so. Kenny Pickett's better than Ridder, says Stephen A. Yeah, he is. And returns out of Philadelphia that he's doing pretty well out there. So, good luck to Kenny out in Philadelphia. Tomorrow, Wednesday, obviously is day 2 of OTAs this week, day 6 overall. Puka was not in LA at that time, Joseph. You're thinking of Odell Beckham. Odell Beckham and Cooper Kupp were the 2 wide receivers there. Tomorrow's OTA number, it would be 5 on the south side out of 10. So we're about halfway through these voluntary proceedings, the football and shorts portion of the summer. James asked, what's Van like as a person when you interview him? I haven't gotten to speak to him yet. I've tried the last 2 open locker room sessions, today and Thursday. I tried to speak to him. Didn't get a chance to. He was busy off doing other things. I didn't even see him today. But since you asked about locker rooms and interviews, I will have something up this evening on Isaac Seumalo and the rookies picking his brain and the rookies being around him and kind of looking at a guy that's been there, done that, won a Super Bowl, and how they can feed off of that and how they can kind of utilize Seumalo as someone to learn from. And Isaac gave some really good comments about that rookie class today that I think you'll enjoy hearing. Hopefully we have Chris back tomorrow on Wednesday. But for now, we're going to get out of here today. Again, 4 p.m. Eastern Wednesday, this show will commence. Not the usual 3 p.m. It will start at 4 p.m. Eastern here on DK Pittsburgh Sports on YouTube. Of course, later in podcast form, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify, and then available on DKPittsburghSports.com. Thank you all for joining in. We appreciate it. Hope you had a great Memorial Day weekend, a safe Memorial Day weekend as well. I know I certainly did. I'm a little, I guess, tired, like recovering from it. Like 3-day weekend, you kind of, it's like summer heat. You're feeling it. It's a pretty slow Tuesday. Hamo, not Wednesday. I don't believe so because DK is in Detroit currently. Damon, you didn't get a notification today because I forgot to create the stream earlier this afternoon. I believe the way it works is the show notifies, or YouTube notifies you if the show is like pre-created, like earlier in the day. I literally created this stream and then clicked live. So that's the kind of day we're having today. We're still getting back in that groove after Memorial Day, after a 3-day weekend, but show does go on and we'll have another one tomorrow. Today is May 28th. Tomorrow's May 29th, and we'll talk to you on that May 29th. Thank you all again. My name is Corey Christen, and we will see you then. 4 p.m. tomorrow. Remember that. Cheers, everybody. Have a great day.